from Zbigniew Brzezinski that's become rather infamous, I would say, in the last couple of years, of a speech that he gave in Montreal, addressing a Montreal branch of the Council on Foreign Relations. I'd like to get more information on that, in fact, because I did not know that there was Canadian branches of the Council on Foreign Relations. I'm not sure if that's simply been mislabeled. I'm not sure of the provenance of this speech. But at any rate, certainly Zbigniew Brzezinski is in this clip, and he is lamenting the global political awakening quite famously now. As I say, it's definitely made the rounds, and a lot of people are familiar with this clip. Although most people are familiar with his lamenting of the rise of the global political awakening, but not so familiar with the beginning part of this clip, in which he laments the fall of the Atlantic unipolar world and the fall of the American empire as the sole arbiter of justice and truth and etc. in the world, and the rise of the multipolar world. Although one has to wonder about perhaps crocodile tears in this. At any rate, let's listen to Zbigniew Brzezinski fearing the global political awakening.
Let me begin by making just a thumbnail definition of the geopolitical context in which we all find ourselves, including America. And in my perspective, that geopolitical context is very much defined by two new global realities. The first is that global political leadership, by which I mean the role of certain leading powers in the world, has now become much more diversified, unlike what it was until relatively recently. Relatively recently still, the world was dominated by the Atlantic world, as it had been for many centuries. It no longer is. Today, the rise of the Far East has created a new, but much more differentiated global leadership. One which, in a nutshell, involves, if one can hazard, an arbitrary list of the primary players in the world scene. The United States, clearly. Maybe next to it, but maybe, the European Union. I say maybe because it is not yet a political entity. Certainly, increasingly so, and visibly so, China. Russia, mainly in one respect only, because it is a nuclear power co-equal to the United States, but otherwise very deficient in all of the major indices of what constitutes global power. Behind Russia, perhaps individually, but to a much lesser extent, Germany, France, Great Britain, Japan, certainly, although it does not have a politically assertive posture. India is rising. And then in the background of that, we have the new entity of G20, a much more diversified global leadership, lacking internal unity, with many of its members in bilateral antagonisms. That makes the context much more complicated. The other major change in international affairs is that for the first time in all of human history, mankind is politically awakened. That's a total new reality. Total new reality. It has not been so for most of human history until the last 100 years. And in the course of the last 100 years, the whole world has become politically awakened. And no matter where you go, politics is a matter of social engagement, and most people know what is generally going on in the world, and are consciously aware of global iniquities, inequalities, lack of respect, exploitation. Mankind is now politically awakened and stirring. The combination of the two, a diversified global leadership, politically awakened masses, makes a much more difficult context for any major power, including currently the leading world power, the United States.
Now, as I mentioned before that clip, I think there may be some degree of crocodile tears in that message, because we know that people like Zbigniew Brzezinski and Kissinger and all of those of that ilk, that type of imperial legate who's running around one step behind the scenes of the political puppet frontmen who are put out front for us to throw our Rotten Tomatoes at when their act gets stale. Well, these imperial legates like the Brzezinskis and Kissingers, etc., who run around and do this strategic thinking behind the scenes to direct the political puppets are, well, they're certainly and quite obviously and openly working towards a type of, well, one world order of some sort or other. And they may or may not say openly that they think that America will be the driving force of that one world order, although people like Soros go around saying it's going to be China. So to what extent Brzezinski is really lamenting the idea that there was the multipolar world that's coming to an end, and to what extent he's celebrating that as the triumph of the globalization which him and his ilk are really trying to bring about, well, I'll leave that for you to decide. And there is, of course, always the caveat with these open source intelligence gatherings that, well, we know that these are going out to the public, so we have to wonder to what extent there are multiple layers of messages being put out by these people. But I will leave that for you to ponder a little bit, and we will come back to that idea a little bit later in today's episode. But for now, let's just simply take in and take the positive from that definitely Brzezinski is lamenting the idea that there is a globally politically engaged and awakening political actors around the globe, and that the citizenry is becoming politically active in a way that wouldn't have been feasible in any previous time in human history, as the free flow of information across the internet mobilizes and informs more and more people about their true political condition and busts through all the phony paradigms of left and right and other such political manipulation techniques that the ruling oligarchs and social engineers have put in our way to try to deflect us onto issues of no significance. So again, there is something positive to be taken from that. And once again, the message comes out that the global elite are panicking to a certain extent and are very much aware that they are losing the information war. So don't buy into the enemy propaganda that resistance is futile and that there's nothing you can do and everything is controlled. Ha ha ha. No, I think very much we can see from clips like these that there is some hand-wringing going on at some elite levels about our ability to truly transform their media paradigm. And we are doing that, and that's what things like the Corbett Report are dedicated to doing. So let's continue to do it. But let's move on to another